It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Dan Rice, who is an NWHL hockey writer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to become a hockey writer for the NWHL?
It was something that kind of came along as I was already writing. I covered the New Jersey Devils for the hockey writers. And the team got located nearby in Brooklyn, the New York Riveters, who are now the Metropolitan Riveters. And one of the players was from New Jersey, where I live. And I reached out to the team to see if I could come down to a game to interview them. And they said no problem. The hockey writers was fine with me going to do that, in addition to my Devils and NWHL coverage. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. That wasn't the first Riveters game. I think it was, I want to say it was maybe their third or fourth overall game, but the first game that I went to was their first win. So that also made it a little bit memorable too. They beat the Boston Pride that day.
What was it like covering the New Jersey Devils as a writer?
It's been a long and fun adventure. It's a job that oftentimes doesn't feel like a job. To steal a quote from the great Doc Emmerich, you kind of get a free ticket to the game, and you get to enjoy the game, and you get to ask the questions as a reporter that you want answers to. Whether it's doing game recaps or doing features on players. I'm happy doing any of that stuff. I love the game so much, and I never really thought I was going to be a writer when I was growing up, when I was much younger. I didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, which, everybody, when you're younger in school and they say, well, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And I was always the odd kid that said, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. The rest of my life is hopefully a really long period of time. So I want to make sure I get it right. I made a few mistakes along the way as far as choices and what I wanted to do. And I guess I settled in on writing and journalism around maybe 1999, 2000. And I decided to go back to school, which I had dropped out of. I just dropped out of college and got a job and was living that way, and decided I wanted to get into writing. Went back to school, took a bunch of journalism classes, and my internship, with a famous hockey writer and historian, Stan Fischler. He working for him, and alongside him, he started taking me to games, and that kind of got my foot in the door. And one day you're watching the games on TV, and the next day you're standing in the locker room behind, a well-respected reporter, and you're watching them be interviewed. It was really mind-blowing at first, and really fun to be kind of almost like a fly on the wall behind the scenes. And then, he helped me find my way, as I said, kind of get my foot in the door. And once my internship with him was done, I was able to bounce around from a couple of websites and finally found the home at the Hockey Writers now, where I've established that relationship with the New Jersey Devils. They knew who I am and what I'm about, and the work that I do. And they graciously allow me to come to their games and cover the team for the past, say over 10 years. And it's been really fun. You grow up rooting for, at least I did, I grew up rooting for teams, and you start to get to know the players as people, and you kind of shift that allegiance aside, and you just want to see people do well. whether it's a guy that's on the Devils or a guy that's playing on the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Metropolitan Riveters. You always you get to know these people, and they become somebody that you know, and you want to see them do well because they're good people, and that's another great aspect of this line of work that I've gotten into is the hockey community is, well, it can be kind of bad and evil and toxic at times on social media and things like that. There are really a lot of great people in it. And when you find them and you can befriend them and get to know them over whether it's a short or long period of time, I think it's just wonderful stuff.
That's amazing. Of course, can you talk about how it feels to interview the players after the games?
It's kind of tricky. It's a little different maybe with the NHL than the NWHL. Um, the NWHL players, bless their souls, that they know that they kind of have to market themselves maybe a little bit more because they aren't as popular. So maybe a player will talk to you after a game and you know 10, 15 minutes after a game is over. If I lost, I wouldn't be in the greatest of moods. I know I'm a bit of a sore loser though, and I'm pretty sure all those competitive athletes are don't like to lose, and why would they, right? But that's part of the game. One team wins, one team loses. So it's always a little trickier interviewing players after games if they've lost. If a player has just lost a game, I'm not going to try and ask them questions about their favorite player growing up or favorite movies, like those kind of things. Like you just kind of want to maybe stick to the game, what just happened in the last 2 hours preceding that interview. Whereas if the team wins, then maybe you can have a little bit more leeway to branch into those other aspects. As a reporter covering the NHL, oftentimes when they let us in the locker room, there'll be 3 or 4 players available. It won't be all 20 at once. So a lot of reporters will all go to one particular player maybe, and there might be another player that nobody wants to talk to or nobody is talking to currently. So I like to, have my homework done beforehand on all these players and kind of have something I could talk to each one of them about maybe if the opportunity presents itself. So I could pull a Blake Coleman aside and say, hey, I wanted to ask you about growing up in Texas playing hockey or your journey in college to the minor leagues before you came to New Jersey to play professional hockey. Things like that. And, if they lost, it's, I'm probably just going to try and keep it strictly upon what just happened in the game that night. And one thing though is different this year. I personally haven't been to any games. I've been covering everything from home, basically via Zoom, whether it's pre-game or post-game press conferences or post-practice press conferences. So you don't really get that alone one-on-one time with players because there'll be 4 or 5 other reporters in the Zoom meeting with that player, and you don't maybe get that exclusive angle or story that you want to get. But this is a different world we've lived in than the last year than the previous years. So you just kind of have to adapt and adjust. And I think there are a few things from this Zoom which has been helpful, like covering games on the road. In the past, if the Devils were on the road, I didn't cover the games because I would have to kind of pay my own way and those kind of things. But now it's when they play in Philadelphia on Sunday night, I could do post-game Zoom with them and maybe get enough information or quotes that I can build a story around. So it's a little bit different that way. And the best time to kind of do those feature stories like I was describing is maybe at a practice before a game if you have that opportunity, or in the NWHL players case, maybe the week leading up to a game, and then you kind of build a feature story that way and have it run the day of or the day before their game coming up. So we've all had to adjust and adapt, and it's been interesting. And hopefully some of the things like these Zooms stick around, in my opinion. I don't know what's really going to happen, but.
Can you talk about, of course, speaking about the Zoom meetings with media, can you talk about, of course, what it was like first to be a part of that and not be face on face with the player?
Yeah, it was a little interesting for me. I guess I have to give a shout out to Mariah Fujimagari. She's currently a goaltender for the Connecticut Whale, and maybe it was a month after the pandemic started. I ended up doing a Zoom with her with her side business, learning about the products that she was working with and trying to market. So that kind of like popped my cherry, for lack of a better term, and helped me figure out how to navigate Zoom and those kind of things. And then from there, we started having media availabilities with NWHL players leading up to Lake Placid on Zoom. So I was able to kind of get a little bit more familiar with the features that way. And so when the NHL season started, which was probably mid-January, around the same time that Lake Placid happened, I was a little bit more familiar with the controls, and now I'm at the point where like with the Devils post-game Zooms or practice, they ask that if you have a question to send the moderator a note in the chat, and he'll put your question into the queue. And so whoever asks him first gets to ask their question first, and so on. And you still see some people like doing the raised hand icon, and it's like, come on, like this guy doesn't know how Zoom works yet. Like, how long has it been? But for myself, as you know, I can be very technology challenged at times, for lack of a better phrase. So to feel like I know a little bit is kind of puff out my chest kind of moment. But it's been fine, and like I said, you have to learn to adapt and adjust. And I'm just thinking, even like I have my my digital recorder here that I record all my interviews on. Up until maybe 2 years ago, I probably used a tape recorder with like the mini tapes, and then I would have to put my earbuds in and listen back to transcribe, stop, rewind the tape, go back. Oh, I missed the spot where I was trying to get to. Oh, I went too far. Now everything is digital. I upload a file to my computer, and I could put my earbuds in, and it's a lot smoother way to work, I guess. I was initially resistant to change a little bit because, the way that I did things was fine, and I didn't have any issues with it. But this is a lot more reliable too, because if your tape breaks, then then you kind of beat, like, at least if the battery dies in this, I have another recorder option on my phone. So I kind of always have my bases covered in those kind of things.
Who are some of the feature stories that you have wrote about in the NWHL?
Oh, geez. I mean, I've written about a lot of different players. They're all really special to me, whether it was from 4 years ago or, this past season. Off the top of my head, some of the ones that stick out are Mariah Fujimagari, who I mentioned a little while ago. She was the emergency backup goalie for all the teams in Lake Placid, and I thought that was really unique. And the reason why she got the job was because she showed her dedication. She didn't have a guaranteed contract with Connecticut, yet she made the drive from Massachusetts to Connecticut 2-3 times a week to practice with the team, to show that she was dedicated and wanted to be a part of something. And that eventually turned into, not only did they want her to be their emergency backup goalie, but they wanted her to be that safety net for the entire league in case a couple of goalies got sick or hurt, and you're stuck in Lake Placid and you can't get a player through quarantine to get up there. So that was a really fascinating and unique story. I always love talking to Jillian Dempsey from the Boston Pride, the captain. Just a great person, so full of energy. She's always smiling, and so passionate about not only her work on the ice, but also off the ice, whether it's helping kids feel comfortable at the rink, or teaching. I believe it's fifth grade class that she teaches at home in Massachusetts. She's fantastic, and I could go on and on, but those are just a few of some of the great stories that I've been able to uncover, and I'm fortunate to be able to have told those stories, whether it's on an article for the hockey writers for the National Women's Hockey League, or on I've done I've dipped my toe a little bit into the podcast game, and we had a little bit of we tried to do a Riveters podcast during the season, but for them it only lasted 3 games, but we had some fun guests on, and I was happy to share that content with the fans, because the amount and one different ways where you can consume content. For NWHL fans, it's limited. Hard to players and the league as much as we can. So anytime we get to do that, did I freeze?
Whenever it comes to players, have you got the privilege? Whenever it comes to players, have you got the privilege to interview the Kersey twins on the Buffalo Buttes and Boston Pride's Caitlin Fracken?
I haven't interviewed Hunter Kersey yet. I hope to in the near future. Hopefully, she comes back for another season. I've interviewed Taylor, without a doubt, one of my favorite people in the league. She just has that, and I guess you mentioned you interviewed her, so I'm sure you got a glimpse into that. What an infectious personality she has. She always makes everybody feel welcome, and she's pretty good hockey player too. In addition to that, so it's always a great time when I have been able to cross paths with her, whether it's driving up to Buffalo for a game, or seeing her in Connecticut, because I live pretty close distance to 2 NWHL teams in Connecticut and the Riveters, so I've been able to get to a few games, and I was really gutted that she was not able to be a part of Lake Placid with her prior commitments to the I believe it was the I'm going to mess up with. I know she's in law enforcement. I don't want to misname the agency that she works for, but as somebody whose father was a cop when I was growing up, I have nothing but respect for that, and her wanting to be some kind of change in our world and society. I think that's great. But having said that, I hope she can play this upcoming season, and I'm looking forward to seeing her again. As I said, one of my favorite people, and she always gives me a great big hug. And after everything we've been through for the last couple of years, I'm really looking forward to experiencing that again, because she's just a really genuine person. As far as Kaylee Fracken, I've gotten to know her over the years quite a bit. She's played a little bit closer to me, so I get to see her a little bit more often. And I've gotten to know her, I would say, a lot better since this pandemic has maybe started. As is the case with a lot of players, I've built the friendships with them, as I mentioned, kind of at the top. I don't kind of look at it as like it's just a job, and it's my job to tell you how many goals and assists they scored in a game, or how many shots they took. Like, these are all great people, and they have great stories, and by getting to know them, you get to learn a little bit more. Maybe they aren't as guarded, and let you into their world maybe a little bit more, and I think that helps enhance the storytelling, and to see Kaylee win the Isabel Cup this year was out of this world. Somebody who's been a part of the league from day one. I know the sacrifices that she's made to play and everything like that. And we just submitted our award ballots recently. I believe the awards are being announced in a couple of hours. And she was my pick for Defender of the Year and MVP because while it was really hard to try and decide who played best in the, like it's almost the equivalent to a player of the week in League Placid and the short amount of games that they played, and some teams played 9, other teams played 4 games. It's not really safe, even balanced as far as I'm concerned, but I do take that role seriously as having a vote. And after actually talking with Kaylee and a few other players and people I trust, I decided to vote for these awards, and we'll see what happens today.
That's amazing. Are there particular teams that you cover, or do you cover all 6 teams in the NWHL?
Yeah, it's I'm more than happy to cover every team. I'll be at more Riveters games than other teams' games just because they play in the same state that I live in, so it's a little bit easier for me to get to. Connecticut is a little bit of a further drive, but I try to get to as many of their games as I can when my schedule allows, with as long as the Riveters aren't home that day and depending on who the Devils are playing that night. This is all pre-COVID, I mean, who knows what everything's going to look like going forward. Hopefully I'll be back at rinks this coming season. But yeah, I have, no preference covering teams or anything like that. More than happy to write about anybody in the league at any point.
What is the day in the life of an NWHL feature writer?
It's not much different from everybody else's life. I mean, I have my contacts that I get information from regarding news, things going on around the league. But again, prior to the pandemic, I had a day job, so I didn't just sit around all day and have all the time in the world to write. I've had a little bit more time to write during the pandemic. Zoom has made that a little bit easier too, because you can do those kind of things as we mentioned. But yeah, it's no different from anybody else's life. I touch base with people around the league, if not daily, then every other day or every couple of days. And now is kind of the slow season where we have the awards tonight, and then I guess we'll start having some free agent signings in a couple of weeks, and the draft at the end of June. And I'll actually be heading up to Buffalo for their free agent camp, and then there's a free agent camp here in New Jersey for both Connecticut and the Riveters the following weekend. So I'm really looking forward to that, being able to get back to a rink and see some people, some familiar faces that I know, and some new faces, because there's always turnover in the NWHL. There's always going to be some new players, so I'm curious to see who shows up at these tryouts and who's going to really stick out and make a name for themselves.
As you prepare for the draft coming up in June, as a writer, can you talk about writing for the draft?
Yeah, that's one area of expertise that's not mine. It's really time consuming, we'll say, for me to follow along with the NWHL and the New Jersey Devils and NHL as a whole, and sometimes the Devils minor league team in Binghamton. So I have some knowledge of the players that may be coming out this year, and this is a weird year because college eligibility is different. Everybody's been granted an extra year of eligibility, so I'm not sure which players will be coming out. I often defer to other people that are more plugged into that world, that aspect of hockey. One of the people I often will follow for that kind of information is my cousin Gab Fundaro. She's written for the Ice Guard and various other places. She wrote for the Hockey Writers for a time way back when, kind of like when I first started. And she's kind of like my go-to expert, but I'll often read the articles on the Ice Garden, because that's a really a great resource for women's hockey, not just the NWHL, not just college hockey, but also international and the PWPHA. So yeah, that's. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you there. It's I could tell you who Alina Mueller is, and Nina Frankel, and maybe a few other names, but I wouldn't be able to give you a breakdown on them. Maybe as we get closer to the draft, I'll have a little bit better idea of who's going to be actually available to be picked, and those kind of things. But anybody's guess is as good as mine. It's just not my area of expertise at this point.
What is something that you learn now that you didn't know before becoming the NWHL free feature writer?
Oh, geez. I guess that women's hockey is a viable entity. I didn't know much about women's hockey, honestly, other than what my cousin Gabs had been writing for the Hockey Writers before the NWHL became a thing. I knew a little bit about some of the Olympic players like Hillary Knight and the Lamoureux twins, but I really didn't have any prior knowledge, and it really just shows you that if you open up your mind and try not to think of it as comparing it to the NHL or men's hockey, it's just hockey, and as hockey fans, it has all the same things that we love about our game. The great Janine Weber, who's played for the Riveters, Boston, and now Connecticut. She said something to me one time in an interview, and we were talking about, what's it going to take to get women's hockey to take that next step to get to the next level of where it needs to be. And something that she said to me was, if you like hockey, you should like our game. Hockey is hockey. And for some reason, I couldn't tell you the rest of the context of the interview. I remember where it was, but other than that, I don't remember much about the interview. I'd have to go back and really look it up. But it's just something that's always stuck with me. And when people ask me that kind of question, it's just one of those things that always pops into my head.
What advice would you give upcoming future writers that are looking to write for the NWHL or for the NHL?
I would say practice. As I detailed at the beginning of our talk, when I first decided I wanted to get into writing, I would watch the Devils playoff games and I would take notes. And at the end of each game, I would just write my own recap. And that's without any journalism background before I had started taking those classes. So it's interesting to go back and look at that book now and just certain things like, when that you learn in journalism. The first time you mention a player's name in a sentence, you use their first name and their last name, but every subsequent time you mention that player, you don't have to use first name, last name, just use their last name. There was little things like that. That's not anything that I knew growing up until I really got into writing and started taking classes and learning the ins and outs of how to write a well done article, one that reads well and isn't choppy and those kind of things. But I would say just practice. Just if you're really into practice, everybody today has a lot better chance than I did when I was growing up. You're doing a Zoom with me right now. When I was growing up, this wasn't a possibility. There wasn't a way for me to reach out to the guy that covered the Devils for the New York Post, or the guy that wrote for the Staten Island Advance where I grew up. Like that just wasn't possible. We didn't have websites where, 1,000 websites that we had options to write for. Everything is different now. So, and I would say, find what you love and try your best. Practice always makes perfect. and always be open to learning. Just because I, have been doing this for doesn't mean that I know everything. As we've talked about a few times now, I didn't know how to use Zoom a year ago. I didn't know how to use a digital recorder 3 years ago. So I'm kind of trying to always adapt and adjust and learn, because that's how you get better constantly, and just don't settle for doing the same thing over and over again.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
You can find me on social media on Twitter at drdiablo.thw. And yeah, that's it. I don't have Instagram. I'm not hip like that. I could, again, I could barely keep track of one social media account and Facebook as well. But you start throwing other ones in there, it becomes a little tricky. So
Thank you again, Dan Rice, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as an NWHL featured writer.
thank you very much, Brandon. It was a pleasure coming on your show.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Dan, for your interview, and best of luck.
Thanks. Take care.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.